We're learning on Daf Chof Tes Amid Beis. We're learning as a schus for Shleima for Ilan Chai Baserach, and as a schus for the neshama of Shleima Abba Ben David. The Mishnah on Chof Tes Amid Beis. Zeh Klal. Kol hashoichet v'hamakabel v'hamahalach v'hazoyrek lechel davar shedarka lechel lahakter davar shedarka lahakter. This is the rule. Anyone who shechts something, that does one of the avodas adam of shchita, kabbalah, halacha, and zrika, lechel davar shedarka lechel lahak davar shedarka lahakter. That means he does any of the avodas adam. Lechel davar, and he does it. Lechel davar shedarka lechel lahakter davar shedarka lahakter, and he has in mind while he's doing it to eat something that he's supposed that he normally eats. It means the basar of the behema, of the carbon. He has in mind to eat it chutz lezmanai ulahakter davar shedarka lahakter, or the emurim that's supposed to go on the mizbeach, or the dam. He has in mind to put the dam on the mizbeach. Kazai is chutzlum kaimai, and he has in mind to do a kazai of that chutzlum kaimai, not in the proper place. Pasul ve'im be'karas. The din is going to be pasul, but it's not pigel because it's not chutzlum zmanai. So it's going to be chutzlum kaimai. It's going to have a din that it pasuls the carbon. Chutzlum zmanai, but if he did these things having a machshava of chutzlum zmanai, pigel v'chayvel of karas. Ubelvad sheyakrav hamater k'mitzvas. This is the part that is really new, and this is really what we were just talking about in the previous Gemara. We learned from the pasuk that it has to be that he's makrav the rest of the carbon properly. As long as he does whatever it is, whatever that the carbon needs to do to be matir, either the dam to go on the mizbeach, or the emurim to go on the mizbeach, or the basar to be nechal, as long as he did all of that properly. But if he didn't do the rest of it properly, then it's not going to have this din that we just said, chayv and love karas. The din of pigel, this din of pigel is a very sensitive thing. It means you have to really be doing a good carbon. You have to be doing your carbon properly. And the one mistake you did is, like we say, you had to be makriv, you had to do part of the avodas hadam with a machshava of consuming one of the matirim chutz lezman, but everything else has to be perfect. So Gemara, ketzah karav hamatir k'mitzvaseh. What does it mean that you did everything else? You brought the rest of the matir properly. Shachat b'shtika. If he did the shchita, which is the first of the avodas hadam, and he didn't have any machshava on that, and then he went ahead and he did the Kabbalah, Halacha, and the Zrika, and then he had a Machshavas Chutz Lezmanai. Or he had a Machshavas Chutz Lezmanai on the Shchita, and then he did the rest of the Avodas without a Machshava, without any bad Machshavas. Or if he did the Shechita Kabbalah Halacha, any one of the four avodas chutz lezmani, zeu shemakriv hamatir k'mitzvaseh. This is somebody who did everything. He did everything other than what he had a machshavas pigel on. He had some part of it. Some part of the avodas adam. He had in mind a machshavas pigel, a machshavas chutz lezmani, and the rest he didn't have any machshav on it, so he did everything else properly, and therefore there's going to be a chi of pigel and a chi of karas if someone eats the basar of that carbon. Shachat chutzlum kaimai. But now we're going to say the reverse. If he had by the shchita machshavas chutzlum kaimai, and then he was kibul halach v'zara chutz lezmani, but then he had the whole rest of the avodas hadam, all of them. He had a machshavas chutz lezmanai. Oy shachat chutz lezmanai or the other way around, even if he had a machshavas pigel by the first carbon, by the first one of the avodas hadam, and then he did the rest of the avodas hadam with the machshavas chutzum kaimai, which is an incorrect machshava. It's a different machshavas psul other than the machshavas chutzum zmana. Oy sheshachat bikibo v'halach v'zarak chutzum kaimai, or if he had any one of the other three avodas, having in mind that they should be chutzum kaimai, and then the rest of it he had in mind chutzum zmanai. And finally, hapesach v'achatas sheshachtan shaloi l'shman. Another possible. Until now, we've been saying a machshavas. What's a machshava that will disrupt this delicate machshavas chutz l'zmani of pigel? We were talking about if he has a machshavas chutz l'mkaimai on another one of the avodas hadam. Now the Mishnah is saying, in addition to having machshavas chutz l'mkaimai to disrupt the pigel, if he also has a machshavas shaloi l'shma, all the way back from the beginning of the Masechta. If you remember, we said that on most karbanos, when you have a machshavas shaloi l'shma, it doesn't passel the carbon. It just le'ol balim shem chayva, but it's still a good carbon. But if a person has a machshavas chutz shaloi l'shma on a carbon pesach or a carbon chatos, that passels the carbon. So if a person had a machshavas chutz l'zmanei, so he shechted the carbon, and he had by the shchita, he had a machshava on his pesach or on his chatas that should be shaloi l'shma, which passels the carbon, and then he was kibul v'halav v'zarach chutz l'zmanei, oy sheshach chutz l'zmanei v'kibul v'halav v'zarach shaloi l'shman, oy sheshach v'kibul v'halav v'zarach daman shaloi l'shman, or if he had by any one of the avodas hadam a machshava of shaloi l'shman by a pesach or a chatas, zehu shaloi karva matir k'mitzvasei. All of these things, whether he had, so basically to encapsulate what we said so far, if he had a machshava, and he had a machshavas chutz l'zmani, that's pigel, and you're going to be chayiv karas on it. But if in addition to the machshavas pigel, he had by any other one of the avodas hadam, either a machshavas chutz l'mkaimeh, or he had a machshava of shaloi l'shma by pesach and chatas, that's not mat karav hamatir k'mitzvasa. He didn't do the rest of the carbon properly, and therefore it's not going to remain a pigel that gets karas. It's just going to be a regular puzzle of carbon, but there won't be karas feeding the bus of such a carbon. Now that's relatively simple. Now the Mishnah continues, and the next part of the Mishnah is going to be subject to a machlekes in the Gemara of what exactly it's referring to. Until now, we're talking about we had a machshava in one avodah sadam, and then another machshava in a different avodah sadam. Now the Mishnah says, lechel kazayis chutz b'chutz kazayis l'machar. If he has a machshava by one kazayis of, let's say, of the if he has a different machshavas in he's having a machshava in the thing that he's planning, the basa that he's planning to eat. That means during the shechita, he's having in mind to eat the carbon chutz l'zmanei. So the question is that going to be pigel? So lechel chazayis v'chutz kazayis l'machar. If he has in mind to eat one kazayis b'chutz, which would make it a chutzum kaimei, and another kazayis l'machar, another kazayis he wants to eat chutz l'zmanei, or vice versa, kazayis l'machar, kazayis b'chutz, and it's not clear whether these two kazaysim, one that he has a machshavas chutz l'zmanei, and one that he has a machshavas chutzum kaimei, are they both talking about during the same avodas hadam? Does it mean that he did the shechita and he had in mind one kazayis of the carbon should be eaten chutz l'zmanei and one chutzum kaimei? Or does it mean that during the shechita he said, I want to do a kazayis chutz l'zmanei, and during the halacha, for example, he had in mind to do a kazayis chutz l'mkaimai, which would be the same, essentially the same case as the first part of the Mishnah. That's what the Gemara is going to clear about. So, but if he did this, he had the Tanakama says he had in mind to do a kazayis chutz, kazayis b'chutz, kazayis l'macha, kazayis l'macha, kazayis b'chutz, or kachatizayis b'chutz, kachatizayis l'macha. He had in mind first to do on a chatzizayis that it should be b'chutz, which is chutz l'mkaimai and not pigel, and then another chatzizayis l'macha that it should be chutz l'zmani, or chatzizayis l'macha, chatzizayis b'chutz. Puzzle the aim by karas. In that case, it's going to be puzzle, but there's not going to be karas. Whether it was a full kazayis or a chatzi zayis, the Tanakama says since part of it was a machshavas, there was an additional machshava of chutz l'mkaimai, that's not going to be machayiv karas. It's going to be puzzle. That's the Tanakama. Amar Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says zeh klal. Kol shemachshavas hazman kadma lemachshavas hamakoim pigel v'chayv alav karas. Yehuda says this is the rule. When the machshava of chutz l'zmanai comes before the machshava of chutz l'mkaimai, meaning where he maybe wasn't matir the rest of, he wasn't makar of the matir k'mitzvasai. But nevertheless, he says it's still going to be a pigel, since his first machshava was for pigel. That's what we're going to pay attention to. We're not going to then disturb that machshavas pigel with his later machshava. It's going to be pigel v'chayv and love karas. But then Gemara is going to declare under what circumstances does Rabbi Yehuda chaylik. It's like I said, it's going to depend on that discussion of what the Tanakama was talking about by Lechel Kazayis B'chutz, Kazayis L'machar. Is that talking about on two separate Avodah Sadam or on the same Avodah Sadam? V'machshavas hamakim kadma l'machshavas hazman patzol ve'en bekaras. But of course, Rabbi Yehuda is maskim that it was first a machshavas chutz l'mkaimai, which is not a machshavas pigel, that came first. Then there's not going to be a din karas. Chum say no, it's not. It doesn't make a difference. Both of them, whether the machshavas zman came first, whether machshavas malkum came first, it's going to be puzzle. There's not going to be karas. The Mishnah concludes: Lechal kechatzi zayis, lahakte kechatzi zayis, kosher. Whether he had in mind to eat a chatzi zayis and then to be makdir chatzi zayis, it's in either case. So kosher she'ein achil v'haktorah mitzdarfen. If he has a machshava, if part of what his machshava is, right? We're talking about a person's doing one of the avodas hadam, the kohen's doing the avodas hadam, and he's having in mind to do the emurim or the achilas basar, chutz l'zmani, chutz l'mkaimai. So we say if he had half of his machshava was on the haktorah, and the other half of his machshava was on the haktorah, let's say on what he's going to eat, the basar that he's going to eat. He's going to eat has some of the basar chutz l'zmani, and he's going to bring a chatzi zayis of the emurim chutz l'zmani. Then that's not going to be a din pigel, because you can't be mitzdaref the haktorah with the achila. Okay. Rabbi
Yehuda is mitzdaref, right?
No, nobody is mitzdaref. That means Rabbi Yehuda, the machlekes before, up till now, we were talking about whether Rabbi Yehuda says that you have in the avodas hadam, he first had a machshavas chutz l'zmani, and then he had on the let's to not pick a side in the Gemara. He just had on the next after the did the shchita with the machshavas chutz l'zmani, then he did the kabbalah with the machshavas chutz l'mkaimai. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, we say since once he had a machshavas chutz l'zmani, by the first thing it's already pigel, and he's going to be chayav karas if you eat the basar. But what does it mean? Chutz l'zmanei, chutz l'mkayim? It means he's intending to eat, let's say, the basar past its time is chutz l'zmanei. If he intends to eat it outside of the place where it's supposed to be eaten, that's chutz l'mkayim. Or if he has in mind to be zoyrek the dam, or to be maktir the emurim on the mizbeach, chutz outside of its time or outside of its place. But then what the Mishnah is ending off with is, if let's say he did the shechita and he says, I want to do half a kazayas of the basar that I'm going to eat later. I'm going to eat it outside of Yerushalayim, which is chutz l'zman. Sorry, not outside Yerushalayim. I'm going to eat it in a week, which is chutz l'zman. And in addition, the emurim that I'm supposed to bring on the mizbeach, a half a kazayas of that, I want to bring on the mizbeach in a week. That's also chutz l'zman for that. That's not mitzdarf. You can't put together his two things that he's focused on, that he's thinking wrongly about. He can't be mitzdarf thinking about two half kazaysim. Now that's not the same thing as being mitzdarf a chatzi zayis of let's say of by the shchita, and well, it's not really. It's not. We're saying it's not. You're not mitzdarf the two machshavas together to make it into one machshavas chutz l'zmanei.
Nobody holds that you can be mitzdarf two halves of a kazayas.
Two halves of kazayas about what you're thinking about doing later.
Right. Correct.
My intention is to eat a half a kazayas. Remember, we always have to remind ourselves, this kayin is just making problems for no reason. He's thinking, I'm going to eat tomorrow a half a kazayas. He already has a plan. He's eating, like half a burger or like a tenth of a burger in a week. And also he's going to be zayrik dam on the mizbeach. He's going to take one thimbleful and throw it. So the two of them together make up a kazayas, but he didn't have one full machshava of doing something in the wrong way. You're not mitzdarf. Those are not mitzdarf. Okay, but back to the original question that we said, the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. That Rabbi Yehuda says if the machshavas pigel comes first, then we pay attention to the machshavas pigel and we ignore the later machshava of chutz l'mkayma, or the machshava shalei l'shma, like we said by Pesach and Chatas. Amar Elfa, machlekes b'shtei avodas. This machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is only when the machshavas chutz l'zmanei, the original machshavas chutz l'zmanei, was in, let's say, by the shchita, and the machshavas chutz l'mkayma was in the second avodah, let's say by the Kabbalah. But if it was all in the same avodah, means during the shchita, he first said, I want to eat the basar chutz l'zmanei, and then he says, I want to eat another kazayas of the basar. I want to eat another kazayas of the basar chutz l'mkayma, all in the same shchita. Divrei akol iru machshavas habi. Everyone will agree that it's not going to be pigel because he had together with his machshavas pigel. You can't say the machshavas pigel took effect first because he had together with his machshavas pigel. He already had the machshavas chutz l'mkayma. Even Rabbi Yehuda would be maskim in that case that you don't say that the machshavas pigel already took effect and therefore the machshavas chutz l'mkayma can't take effect on top of it. So that's Ilfa's shita. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Af ba'avoda achas machlekes. Rabbi Yochanan say no. Rabbi Yochanan says Rabbi Yehuda would say his shita even in a single avoda, even within shchita, he can have two a machshavas chutz l'zmanei and then a machshavas chutz l'mkayma, and then Rabbi Yehuda will say that is a machshavas pigel, and the machshavas, since the machshavas chutz l'zmanei, even in the same avoda, doesn't take effect. Sakdumar. I want to ask the technical question. The Bishlam Elfa, according to Elfa, that he says that everyone agrees within the same avodah. If you do two kazaysim in the same avodah, that it's going to be mixed up. Even Rabbi Yehuda is going to be masking that it's not going to be a machshavas pigul. So midareisha b'shtei avodas, sefer nam b'shtei avodas. The whole first section of the Mishnah, which discussed he was hashaych, he shechted, he did certain avodas l'shem pigul and other avodas l'shem something else chutzum koima or shaloi l'shma. So the Tanakhama said it's whether it's the machshavas pigul is first, whether machshavas pigul is last, it's all the same thing. It's not going to be pigul. So that was specifically talking about two separate avodas. So now on this din that where they're arguing about this last din of the Tanakhama, he says lecha kazayis b'chutz, kazayis lamacha, kazayis lamacha, kazayis b'chutz is also talking about with in two separate avodas. So it makes sense that the way the Tanakhama, what the Tanakhama described in the first half of the Mishnah, and then the way the Tanakhama describes it in the second half of the Mishnah, where there's a machlokes between him and Rabbi Yehuda, is all talking about the same case with two separate avodas, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda is chaylik on. So it makes sense. B'dereisha b'shtei avodas, sefer nam b'shtei avodas. El Rabbi Yochanan reisha b'shtei avodas is sefer avoda achas. According to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda is only chaylik by Rabbi Yehuda is even chaylik by within the same avoda. Why are we switching over to talking about a second case? We're saying that now that the Tanakhama is talking about a new case. We're talking about in the same avoda. Why is the Mishnah switching the case that it's talking about? And with the Gemara in Reisha b'stei avodas, Sefer bein avodah achas bein b'shtei avodas. It's not a kasha. The beginning we said the case of shtei avodas. Then when we wanted to bring out the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, then we addressed the case even of avodah achas, where Rabbi Yehuda is going to be chaylik even in avodah achas. But in the Chanami, the Reisha was talking about the basic case, and then the Sefer talks about the case of not just shtei avodas, where the machshavas were one in the, let's say, the shechita, and the other one is the Kabbalah. It could even be talking about where both machshavas were in the shechita, and nevertheless, Rabbi Yehuda will say that we're going to say that the machshavas, if the machshavas pigul came first, it remains pigul. Tnan, Amr Yehuda, zeh klal, in machshavas hazman kadma lemachshavas hamakom, pigul b'chayven olav karas. Rabbi Yehuda said a rule at the end. He said a rule. If the machshavas hazman comes first, if his machshavas pigul came first, then it's going to be considered pigul. We don't care that later on in the process during this carbon he has a different machshava psul. So Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Hainu Diktani Zaklal. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we understand why you say Zaklal. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that they're arguing both in the case of two separate avodas, as well as in the case of where he had a machshava at the beginning of one avodah of the same avodah, and then a different machshava in that avodah. So we're saying Zaklal, whether you're talking about one avodah or whether you're talking about two avodas. El ilfa my Zaklal. What's the rule? Rabbi Yochanan only says his din. I'm sorry, not Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yehuda only says his din by he only is chaylik by two separate avodas, but in in the same avodah he's maskim to the chacham. So what's the klal? It's just one specific case. And the Gemara kasha ena chanami. It's a good kasha about how to interpret the Mishnah according to Ilfa. Now the Gemara is going to go into the din of Tmura. It's not I don't think this is the most complicated example of Tmura. Sometimes there's some dinim of Tmura that get complicated. This is the basic. We're going to deal really with a very basic din of Tmura. Tmura is a rule that if a person sets aside a carbon, right? He decided I'm going to be a good guy. I want to bring a shlomim, and he says Harei alai shlomim, and I'm making a nedava that I'm bringing a shlomim, making a neder I'm bringing a shlomim, and then a week later he set aside an animal. He said this is my fine cow. It's worth $1,000. I'm sending it aside to be my shlamim. And then a week later, he comes across an amazing specimen, even more beautiful cow that's worth $10,000. He says, you know what? I'm going to exchange my first cow, my $1,000 cow, and I'm going to put in its place a $10,000 cow. I'm just making the case of the values. Those are not really essential to the discussion. I'm just explaining why he decided to do this. But he did a stupid thing. He was over a lav. Lav, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to try. You're not allowed to say I'm exchanging my original carbon. Once you makdish it, the die is cast. It's irreversible. And in addition to being over on a lav, he also what he's accomplished is that both karbanos are going to be have kedusha. Now they're both going to be they're both going to be shlamim. One's going to be a tmur shlamim and one's a regular shlamim. The original one's still a shlamim. Nothing changed. It didn't get deconsecrated, so to speak. It's still mekudesh, and the new one now is also kaddish. In this case over here, this fellow, in addition to doing something foolish and doing a tmura, he even couldn't do that in a proper way. He did it in a very complicated way. Tanasim, harezu tmuras oila tmuras shlamim. If the guy, instead of he had an oila, he had said, I'm separating this carbon as an oila, let's say oilas nedava. I want this cow to be my oila. And then he said, now I have another cow that I'm putting in its place, and I want it to be harezu tmuras oila, harezu tmuras oila, harezu tmuras shlamim. Or harezu, he said first, I want it to be a tmuras oila, and then he said on the same replacement cow, I want it to be a tmuras shlamim. So he gave two designations to the original carbon. Yeah. I'm sorry, the other way around. I said it backwards. He had one oila and one shlamim that he had set aside. He had brought an oila and he had brought a shlamim. And now he's bringing a third animal, and he's saying, I want this to be they're standing right in front of him, his let's say his oila. I don't think an oila could be a cow. I'm not sure. Whatever it is. But he had his oila, let's say his oila cow. Maybe that might be wrong, I'm not sure. But he had his oila animal and his shlamim animal standing in front of him, and he brings a third animal, and he says, I want this third animal should be an oilas, it's a tmura for my oila and it's tmura for my shlamim. So the Mishnah says, Sanaf, harezu tmuras oila, tmuras shlamim, harezu tmuras oila. Divrei Reb Meir. Reb Meir says, and this should sound familiar, Reb Dimi is going to say on the bottom of the Yamid that this is similar to Reb Yehuda of our Mishnah. He said, since the first thing he said was tmuras oila, so this animal will come to tmura for the oila, not a tmura for the shlamim. And then it will get the din that it's brought as an oila. We follow the first thing he said, just like Rabbi Yehuda said by us, when he had a machshavas zman followed by a machshavas pigel, a psul, we follow the machshavas zman. He had a machshavas pigel followed by a machshavas psul. We follow the machshavas pigel that came first. So too over here, a mayor is saying, if you have a machshavas oila first, so we say that it becomes an oila. You follow the first thing he said.
The Meir is a Tana, right?
Yes, this is a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Tmura. Amar Rabbi Yosi in that Mishnah responds to him, if his machshava from the beginning was that it should first be, I want this new animal to be an oila. So once he made it into an oila, that's irreversible. It means if his machshava was only one thing, then it would be Mekayim. But if his machshava from the beginning was he really wanted to say both, it wasn't that he wanted to first say an Oila, and then afterwards he changed his mind and he said, no, I want it to be a Shlam. But it just, he really wanted it to be both an Oila and a Shlamim, but there's no way to say two things at the same time. Then we're going to say Dvar Kayamim, both are going to, so to speak, take effect. It doesn't really take effect. It's impossible for both of them to take effect. So Rashi says, what happens is you have to yirachi starve. You got to put it out to pasture. There's a English expression, to put out to pasture, which I think comes from this from the Gemara. When you have something that's unable to be brought as a carbon, you put it out to pasture. You wait for it to get a mum, and then it goes to lekayetz hamizbech. It goes for bedek habayis. The Emisha Amar, so Rabbi Yossi continues, the Emisha Amar harezu tmuras oila, nimlach, you take out the vav, nimlach v'amar harezu tmuras shlamim. If he said first, I want it to be a tmuras oila, and then he changed his mind, and he says, I want this to be a tmuras shlamim, harezu oila. In that case, since he had in mind first that it should be an oila, it remains an oila. You can't take effect something on top of the original machshava. Now the Gemara asks a question on this din, and Rashi says on the sheet of Rameh. The Gemara later on is gonna define precisely what the machlokes between Rameh and Rabbi Yossi is. That's an Amid base. But for now, Rashi says we're analyzing Rameh's sheet. Rameh said that we follow the first thing that he said. He first said oila, so it remains an oila. Ibaylit. Harezu tmuras oila ushlamim ma. In the Mishnah, it said Harezu tmuras oila, tmura shlamim. He said the word tmura on each one. He said, I want it to be a tmuras oila, and then he said, I want it to be a tmura shlamim. What if he combined the two phrases? He says Harezu tmuras oila ushlamim. So that sounds more like he's saying all at one time. He means to apply both of them. Reb Meir said that you go with the first thing he said. But what about in this case, where he made it even more clear that it's not that he has first a machshavas oila and then a machshavas shlam? So is Reb Meir going to say, going to still say the same thing? Then the Gemara says, and if you'll say no, Reb Meir will say, even in that case, he's going to say, even though he combined the two things, he said, oil shlamim. Still, he said oil first, so he means to designate the oil that it should be an oil. What's the din if lachtzosma? If he said, I want half of it to be an oil and half to be a shlamim. So there, from the beginning, when he says a half, now saying you want something to be half of one carbon and half of another carbon is really an impossibility. But the question is, once the first half takes effect, then the second half can't apply on it. Where Meir says then even in that case, where he split it into half, so he's making it even more clear that he really wants the second one to take effect as well as the first one. He's saying, I only want it to be half. But the question still is, if his intention is first that half should take effect, half should be an oila, and then the second half should be a shlamim, once half of it becomes an oila, that the way the lashon of Rashi is, it's mispashit. The din of oila spreads out into the whole animal. There's no such thing of having an animal that's half an oila and half a shlam. So once you do half an oila, it automatically becomes a whole oila. So even though he's made every effort to indicate that he really wants both things to take effect, nevertheless, would Reb Meir say in that circumstance that we're still going to say that the din oila takes effect, since it came first, that's what takes effect. So the machlokes on this second question. Amar Abaye, b'havadei moeder Reb Meir. Abaye says certainly on that last case, Reb Meir has to finally concede. If he said, I want half of it to be a oila and half of it to be a shlamim, you can't separate it and say, oh, he said the first thing he said, that takes effect. Because he was very, very clear that he wants both of them to take effect. Rava Amar, it's not really necessarily of what he wants. I mean, that's what he's done. Rava Amar, no, adayin hi machlekes. Rabba says it's still a machlekes even in that case. Amar Rav Abaya. So now we finally bring it back to our Mishnah. Why are we talking about this here? Even though, like we said, we're going to say it's a similar machlekes. Amar Rav Abaya. Lididach the Amrit. Oh, it's already. I'm sorry. We're gonna have to wait. We're gonna have to finish this tomorrow. I didn't realize with the time.
Yes,